firewall, I have my template that I've cut out previously, and referring to my cutting guide, I can see that when we cut out our bulkhead panel, we put a piece aside. This piece here, and I've marked it with the part number 148, which refers to the door bits. So I'm now going to put the template on here and start cutting it out. To position the firewall template in the correct spot, I'm referring to my cutting guide. It shows that I've got 3 other parts that I need to cut out, 2 door panels and 1 B2 panel. Now, I'm looking at 2 drawings that I have here, drawing number 19 and 29. They actually have the templates that I need to position template T10 in the right spot. So we'll have to cut them out, position them, and mark it out, and then we shall cut them. I'm going to trace out this template here first, which is template 31, and then I'm going to turn it around and place it against these other 2 edges here and trace it, and that'll give me the definitive position that I can place my other 2 templates that I have here. Bearing in mind that I need enough room to cut it all out, and I'm only concentrating on template T10 for the firewall. I've now got this template marked out and traced around, but before you remove it, grab your centre punch, because we have position here of some drill holes that we have to put in for our little door handle. So mark them out as such to save a lot of dramas later on. I've now marked out the second template that I need. Don't forget your centre punch lines for the little handle, and I'm now positioning the 2 templates so that I have enough room to cut them out comfortably. As you can see, I've now completed marking out my templates, and what I want you to do now is mark out the centre of these 4 holes. Whilst the templates are still stuck down, have a look underneath, make sure all the lines are in place as we've done previously. Yep, just a quick check, it's all good. So now we're going to concentrate on the firewall and cut it out. As you can see, I now have all my pieces marked out, but I'm going to concentrate on the firewall. I'm going to think about the best way to cut it out from my sheet of ply. Given the tools I have, I'm going to use a track saw. I'm going to cut a nice, neat square and on the line, so I'm not doubling up on my cutting. If you don't have a track saw, you can use one of the other methods that we've shown you earlier. I'm now set up to do the first cut for my firewall. And as you can see, I've got some tape put down to give me the definitive mark of where I've got to start or stop my cut. I have to be very wary that I have additional pieces marked out at each end. So give it a practice run first. Be fully aware of how you're setting up distance you have to cut. Check the depth of your blade so that you're not going and cutting into the bench, and making sure that your track saw is lined up perfectly with the side of the firewall. And now, if it doesn't drop down completely, just means the corners are still hanging on. We can get in there with the panel saw and cut them out neatly. Now that that's cut, let's put this away for later. We'll cut them out as we need them, and let's concentrate on the firewall. As you can see, I've got my piece nicely cut and to size. Now I'm going to do as previously done, drill a hole with my 44mm hole saw, cut the 2 straight lines out, remove that piece, and I will also remove the majority of the waste across the top, and then finish the curves off and the corners on my disc sander. You can use other methods, hand tools, an orbital sander, if you have a belt sander, even a spoke shave or a hand plane. You'll be able to get that down and finish it off. But you do need to be very careful and make sure that it is square when you're finished. I'm now getting ready to use my disc sander. Prior to starting, you see there's a little bit of grit on there. I'm using a belt restorer and making it operate and running it across the face of the disc in order to clean it all up. I'm now prepared and ready to sand down to the line. Please be wary, this machine here can take skin and nails off your fingers, so concentration, standing correctly and sanding in a nice even motion will get the job done. Now that I've got my firewall in position, I'm going to think about the screws that I'm using. I'm going to need 6 screws, and I'm using an 8 gauge by 20mm screw. Now with 8 gauge screws, that means it's 8mm across the head and it has a 4mm shank. Given the situation here where I have to fit one piece to the other, I'm going to use a 4mm pilot hole. So I'm going to take the piece away from the bulkhead and drill my 6 holes that I require. 4mm, that means that the screw will actually fall right through the hole. Some people will use a 3mm hole, but if you've ever done this sort of task before, as you're biting in with the screw, it actually lifts the material a fraction off the material you're trying to bite into. So the idea of using a larger or 4mm pilot hole means that the screw will fit through, bite into the second piece and pull the 2 pieces together. And that's what we're trying to achieve. I've now drilled all my pilot holes and I've double checked the size on both sides of the firewall, and it's centered right where it needs to be. So the next process is that I'm going to fit the screws and fit it home. But the issue is that if you're doing it with a hand screwdriver, if you don't have a battery screwdriver, you may need to countersink the holes first. So place the screw in place. And because I'm using self-countersinking screws, this job's very easy. You might have heard the screw gun rattling and making a bit of noise. It's because it's got a torque setting on it, which is really handy as the screws are not buried really deep. And that's something you need to be wary of, otherwise they'll come out on the other side. That's our bulkhead and firewall completed, all in place. Now we'll move on to the next part. We're now looking at part 83. It's the top cap. It's made from 42 by 30mm DAR pine, and it fits at the top of our bulkhead. And we need to refer to drawing number 10, which has our full-size template, which is located here. Our T8 template has a full range of sizes on there in order for you to be able to draw it out by hand. As you can see, the full length of it is 558mm. It is 30mm thick, and we have 2 separate areas of 75mm here to locate the actual curvature of our piece of material. It can be drawn by hand, but what we're going to do is cut this template out and trace it on top of our material. I now have my material 30mm by 42 in my dressed pine, and I've got my template cut out as well. So I'm now going to place the template on the narrow edge and position the template a few millimetres in from the end, which will allow me a little bit to clean off, and I will trace the template out and then think about the best way to cut all this out. I've now done the tracing of the template on my material, and I have my 2 end marks and the radius marked out. What I'd like you to do is to grab the square, A square, and continue those lines down on the face of our material. It's very important to get this accurate point here and on this side. And that will give us our definitive marks as to where to cut our material to length and where we can start to work on our curved piece. Now that I have all my marks in place, I'm now going to cut it to length with my drop saw. You can use a hand saw, or a jigsaw or other cutting tools, but the drop saw will be the quickest and the easiest way of cutting that. If you're going to use a handsaw, don't forget you'll have to plane the ends nice and square. I've now got my piece cut to length. As you can see, the curve is marked out, and I'm now thinking of the best way to cut all this out. I can use a handsaw and do various saw curves and remove the waste with a chisel. I can cut it out using a jigsaw, or the best way I'm going to go with is a bandsaw and then finish it off on the bobbin sander. I'm now at the bandsaw ready to do my cutting. A few things just to recap: make sure that your fence is down reasonably low on the correct height to suit your material. If you've not used a bandsaw before, I would suggest putting a couple of relief cuts in there, so as you're cutting through, the pieces will fall away. It'll be nice and easy. Don't forget your protective safety equipment. So I've got my bobbin sander all set up here, ready to go. I've chosen the largest wheel because it's a large arc. It will make it a lot easier to feed the material through. As you can see, I've taken most of the waste out and very close to the pencil line, so be wary to hold your material nice and firm as you're feeding it through. So I've achieved my nice smooth finish. Some of you may have noticed that I'm going pretty quick backwards and forwards, and that I do because I can feel if there's a few little undulations or bumps in the material itself, and then I can concentrate and then just finish it all off nice and smooth as the final pass through. I now have my piece complete, sanded from the bobbin sander, and doing a quick test fit, it will attach to the front panel of my little pedal car. As you can see, the edges need to fit nice and neat in there, so I'm only going to sand the top front edges just to take the arris off, the sharpness off it, and then I'm now going to pre-drill some holes to attach this to our front panel. I now have my little piece just test fitted over here, as you can see. Some of you may experience a little bit of rocking that occurs. Please don't be concerned. It could be the plywood a little bit out. I've double checked this with a straight edge. It's nice and straight, so I'm happy with that, and we're going to fix it on there. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to turn this over, and using my template that I previously marked out that top cap with, it has markings on there for where the screws are going to fit. It's important that we drill a clearance hole right through this headboard here, this piece here, in order for the screws to go through nice and neat. And I have to come from this side and not the other side to alleviate the breakout on the veneer. So putting this into position, I'm then going to mark this with my little center punch on the marks that are provided on the template. Now, having marked out the position of where the screws are going, I'm using an 8 gauge by 25mm screw. So therefore I'm going to use a 4mm drill bit to drill clearance holes. The idea of that is that the screw won't bind onto this piece of material, but will fix into the top cap that I have now just made. And that way they'll pull those two pieces of material together. And I'll also be countersinking on both sides. I'll use a countersink bit on this side, and on this side I will just do a minor, very small countersink to get rid of any swarf or waste splintering that occurs. So as you can see, I've drilled my clearance holes and I've gotten rid of the swarf that was on there. So I'm now ready to fit this onto our board. So what I'm going to do is run a bead of glue on this piece here, not on here because I don't have the shape marked out. So I'll run the glue on here, I'll turn this over, clamp it in position, and I will then drill some clearance holes using a 2.5mm drill bit. And then I'll fit the screws in place. Be aware not to use too much glue. As you can see, that little task is now complete and it's fitted up nicely. You may experience some excess glue in the joint there. You can use a paper towel or a rag. A lot of people will use a damp cloth to remove excess waste. I'd be a little bit wary about that because it can bring up the grain, which is unnecessary. You can use a chisel to clean out the excess glue. And as I said previously, don't go overboard with the glue, it's not necessary. Having done that task, it's now a very good time to check everything, making sure that your pieces are all aligned. I've made sure this was all flush up the front, at the top here, but I have noticed that it's overhanging a little bit on either side. So what I'm going to do is now just sand that flush with my top panel. And for our next part that we need to manufacture is now part 87. It's noted as a kickboard, it's 12mm marine ply, and it fits in the back area here of our cabin. And referring to our template, which is drawing number 11, you can see the full size template that we need to use and cut out and trace it onto our piece of material. I now have the template, part number 87, my kickboard, ready to go. And the piece of material I'm using is the other half of the sheet that we cut previously for the other parts. And so now I need to work out where it fits. But I need to refer to the cutting guide, which shows where it is. And I've got other pieces that are intermingled with it. So referring to part number 138 on drawing 28, I'm now measuring from this side 845mm plus 10 to allow for any trimming at a later date. And then I'll cut straight down so that I'll have a piece more manageable to cut my kickboard out of. But I've got another piece that goes here. So again, refer to that drawing and you'll find that that piece is at 125mm. And checking that, I have enough room. There's also another piece that fits down in this corner. Again, refer to your drawings and check your measurements and make sure that that is in the right spot. And what I'm going to do now is work this out parallel, do a straight cut, and then I'll be able to get this piece out. I'm now all set up to cut out this piece that I require, and I'm just about set to go. I've got it all up on blocks so my material's nice and safe, won't fall in. But most of you will understand that as I'm going to run across with my track saw, you'll find that you'll get splintering off your material. So I'm going to give you a little tip. I'm going to turn my track saw around and place it right on the line that I want to cut, and I'll double check the measurement just to be sure, which I am, and I'm going to score my piece of ply with a knife. I don't have to press hard, I'm just give it a second go. And what that means is that I won't get the splintering that I normally get when I'm running across the grain. And I will set the saw up so that I will be within a whisker of that line. I've now cut this to a manageable size, as you can see, and what I'm going to do now is put this piece to one side, and I'm going to mark it for my part number 138. The template that I've got cut is now going to sit there perfectly. So now I've got my template in position, and as you can see it's right up against the long edge and the short edge, and I have all this material here. And what I'm going to do is mark down the piece numbers for later on. That'll stop the temptation of cutting into this material. This part number, as per my guide, tells me it's B3, and this one along here is part number 139. So I will now trace all this out, and then we'll think about cutting it. And now referring to the cutting guide, and as mentioned previous, there is a piece that goes here and other pieces and my larger one down here as we've got marked. So I now have to think about the best way to cut this out. And I'm going to go with the track saw. So I'm going to cut straight down here and straight across the bottom of this, being wary that I have another piece in this side here. And then I'll cut out the curved pieces with a jigsaw. I've got my track saw set up, but like everything, I think it's square, but I'm going to double check it with my combination square here, and I am square with this top edge where my template is marked out. So now I'm ready to cut. The other thing I've done is I've put a small line here so I know where to stop. I don't want to continue all the way through because there are other pieces here. As you can see, I've stopped very close to the other cut. This one I didn't do with the knife because it's with the grain, but this one I cut with the knife so that I get a nice clean edge. All I need to do is just tidy up these little curved pieces now. These are nice and straight. I have now completed the sanding process. That's all done. So what I'm going to do now is place my template back over the top, just to make sure that we're accurate, and we are. Place that back down. Wonderful. The reason why I'm doing that is I'm now going to centre punch the position of the screw holes that I need for when it becomes time to fit it. And I'm now set up with my 4mm drill bit. Why 4mm? Because on my template it clearly states that I'm using 8 gauge by 30mm screws. So 8 gauge refers to the diameter of the head of the screw, and so therefore half the size of that 4mm will be my clearance hole. Having done that process, I'm now going to change over to my counter sinking bit, and then slowly, I'm being very careful not to push too hard on these because it is a new bit and it will make a very big hole if you're not careful. And as in the past, I'm going to turn it over and just clear away the rubbish from the back. I'm now working on the next part, part number 89. It's the timber floor of our little pedal car. It's made from the 12mm marine ply, fits in this position here, and as you can see it's not very wide to allow for the pedals to operate. Now going to our template guide, you can see the full sizes here, and we'll be cutting that out. I've got my material here to cut out my next piece that I need. And the wood floor is, as you can see, 170mm by 499. Referring to my cutting guide, which is most important, it marks out that it needs to be down in this corner. So I'm simply going to draw 2 lines and cut it out with my track saw. 499. I'm doing the long cut first because I know I've got a little bit of room here as I've referred to the cutting guide. And this cut here, I need to be a little bit more careful as I don't have a lot of space. There's my piece already cut, and as you can see, I stayed away from that line. I just went halfway, everything's perfect. So these pieces are all complete now and ready to be mounted to the pedal cart.